afternoon and welcome to the latest broadcast from Bedford County Public Schools. I'm Ryan Edwards, and approximately 4 months ago, we hired a new superintendent. Dr. Bergin came on board, unanimously voted in by the Bedford County School Board, and you've taken over June 1st. And Dr. Bergin, it has been one heck of a ride since then, right?
It has. It's been an exciting and thrilling ride, for sure.
Okay, and lately, we've certainly had a resurgence once again of the COVID disease and a new variant. And I reached out to organized groups around the county, consisting of parents, the PTA, students, the SCA, the community, with our education foundation, and also from staff with our Bedford Education Association. And of course, they have questions. And if you have some time today, we'd like to see your thoughts on those questions.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions. I know there's a lot of questions and concerns in the community with all those groups you mentioned.
Okay, so let's begin with an easy one. How did we get to where we are, and where do you see us going from here?
Well, I mean, the shortest version to that question is, while we might like to be done with COVID, COVID is not done with us. When I interviewed for the job and the board and I came to an agreement, and I was doing some transitional visits to Bedford County back in the March, April, May timeframe, I was just full of optimism about the school year that we're in now. Of course, I didn't know what June and July and August held in store for us, with changing information as the COVID-19 Delta variant became more and more prevalent and more of a concern. So, that's the short version of how we got to where we are. As much as I would love to be done with COVID-19, as I'm sure everyone else would, it's not done with us.
And so another topic, Dr. Bergin, that's been spoken about a lot recently has to do with exemptions. And under the previous, I believe, executive order, things were different than they are now. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So we do have a health and safety mitigation plan like every other school division. And our health and safety mitigation plan is completely aligned with those guidelines from the Virginia Department of Health and the Virginia Department of Education, like every other school division in the Commonwealth. So last year, there was a different executive order in place than the health order this year. So your question was relative to exemptions. Last year, the executive order that applied to the entire state did allow for exemptions from wearing a mask. But recall that executive order applied to every citizen everywhere you found yourself. Whether it was in school or in a grocery store or wherever you were. This year's health order is only relative to schools. And so the executive health order says that all students, staff, and visitors who are inside of a school building shall wear a mask. And for individuals who cannot wear a mask because of a medical concern or a sincerely held religious objection, that those individuals, there should be a process for accommodating those individuals. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been focusing on wanting to accommodate individuals who have contacted us and have shared that they have a medically based concern or a sincerely held religious objection.
And from what I understand, 97% of our students have complied in one way or another. That's a good number. Can you talk about the 3% and how we've addressed those individuals?
Yeah, I mean, in round figures, that's about right. We have around 8,900 kids in our school division, and we have just about 300 or just a little more than 300 families who have communicated with us that they have a concern. About half of them, it's a medically based concern, and the other half, it's a sincerely held religious objection. So for the ones that are medically based, we are not requiring any medical documentation for the vast majority of them. They simply communicated to us as parents that they were concerned about either duration of time for the child wearing a mask or sensory issues with the mask, wearing of a mask. And so we've been able to accommodate them by asking that they only mask up when they are within 6 feet of other students or staff, which is going to pertain when we're in transition. So when you're moving from class to class or coming in and off of the bus loop, that you'd wear your mask. Once you're situated in your classroom and we can separate you by 6 feet, that you can lower your mask. And the same thing for the students with a sincerely held religious objection. We ask that they wear a mask or a face shield while they're in transition from point A to point B. And once they're in the classroom, that they can lower their mask. We had just a small handful of parents who we were not able to accommodate in those ways. And so we've recently communicated with them about having their child be eligible for enrollment in virtual Virginia, which is really what the CDC's leading recommendation is for students who cannot or will not wear a face mask, that you consider virtual instruction. So that's what we're doing for just a very small number of students.
So that gives me a chance to transition very easily into the virtual format. Last year, we had our own academy called Bedford Connects. This year, we are directing families and students to Virginia's platform. Can you tell me why that is?
Yeah, sure. So you're right. Last year, Bedford County had a wonderful offering for students called Bedford Connects. But bear in mind, Ryan, last year, where we didn't know very much about the pandemic, we were still, relatively speaking, fairly early on in this dealing with COVID-19. We had about 40% of the students in Bedford County who wanted a virtual option. So there was volume of students. There were thousands of families who wanted a virtual option. It made perfect sense from an economy scale for efficiency and effectiveness to have our own homegrown virtual option. As I was coming on board back in late spring into early summer, staff had communicated with parents and asked if they were interested in continuing on with a virtual option. And in Bedford, like virtually everywhere else in the state, the numbers dropped from thousands to just a couple of hundred. There just wasn't enough scale to continue with a Bedford Connects full-blown virtual option. So the state of Virginia ramped up, and they are offering virtual Virginia, not just for Bedford students, but for students in all 134 school divisions across the Commonwealth. They're still our students, so they're enrolled with Bedford County. Their teachers of record are virtual Virginia teachers, but we continue to employ what we call learning coaches. So they're our kids. And so if they're struggling or they have questions or they need some assistance here locally, they are assigned a learning coach that helps them navigate through virtual Virginia.
Great. Like I said, I polled a number of organizations that consisted of our main stakeholders for this interview, and all the questions are derived from things that they asked. But here's a specific one from our staff members. How do we continue to keep our students and staff safe with the increased number of cases and infection rates that we're seeing?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And what I most appreciate about that question is it aligns with my number one goal, which I've stated many times to our school board and our community. I earnestly want our schools to be open for 5 days of instruction, full days of instruction for all of our students. We have, last year I said it was about 60% wanted to be in person, 40% online. This year it's 95% of our families want their kids in school. We want them at school. We know that in-person learning for most children, the vast majority of children, is a way better option than a virtual option. So we need our schools to stay open. We also want our extracurricular activities to be, fully operational as well. So the question from the teachers specifically was, what do we need to do in order to stay open?
I think it was, how do we continue to keep our students and staff safe? And
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, we have a good health and safety mitigation plan. So I would say, let's be vigilant. I opened up this conversation with you by saying, as much as we want to be done with COVID, COVID is not done with us. And so last year, I wasn't here, but I suspect there was just a different mindset from folks. And we just gotta, as much as we don't want to, because I sure don't want to, we need to get back in that mindset that if we're going to win and we're going to defeat COVID-19, we need to do the things that all of the health organizations are telling us we need to do. The big three, the main three mitigations here and everywhere else are vaccination, physical distancing, and masking. And then there are other layers of mitigation, making sure that you have good hand washing and proper etiquette when you're sneezing and coughing, and of course, keeping our schools clean and sanitized. But what we all can do together is lean into those health and safety mitigations and make sure that we're keeping ourselves safe and we're keeping one another safe so that we can keep our schools open.
thank you. And we certainly hope this isn't a precursor of things to come, but can you talk to me about the situation out at Stanton River High and Middle?
Yeah, boy, I sure hope that's not a precursor of things to come. But in consultation with the health department, if anyone watching this video is not already aware, we needed to close Stanton River Middle and High School for in-person learning for a couple of days last week, because there was just such a high case count of students who were in school. We were learning with each passing day, Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday, more and more kids at Stanton River who were coming to us through the health department and sharing with us that they were positive for COVID-19. And through contact tracing, we were able to determine that virtually all of them, or the vast majority of them, came from the preceding week leading into a football game. So the students on the field, the athletes themselves, and then the students who were attending at the game, most of them not wearing a mask, very close proximity to one another, and students who were there at the game, either on the field or in the stands, who were positive for COVID-19 on that day, were transmitting it unknowingly to other students who then showed up, 2, 3, 4 days later with a positive test. But in the interim, they were spreading it. So we had to close the building for a couple of days. We're trying to ride this out. So this week and next week, we are cohorting in those two buildings, and everyone will be very familiar with that, because last year Bedford County cohorted the entire school year. That just means kids come into one room and they stay in that room for the day, and they don't get up from that room and travel. We're trying to limit the number of people kids come into contact with. So while they're in that one room, instead of leaving to go see their teachers come to them through technology. We were good at this. We had a whole year to get good at this. And so our students are still receiving what we call synchronous instruction, which is like you and I right now talking to each other through a technology connection. Teachers are teaching the children at Stanton River Middle and High School with synchronous instruction. And then students also have independent work. We're doing all that in one location. That's what we call cohorting. So yeah, I hope it's not a precursor, as you mentioned, Ryan, for other buildings, but it's certainly a possibility that if we don't get ahead of this Delta variant, it's very likely that we're going to see more rolling school closures to in-person instruction, where the children will continue to attend school, but they'll do it virtually from home, followed by a period of time of cohorting. Again, this is not unique to Bedford County. If you subscribe to any newspaper, you would know that this is happening all over the state of Virginia, including right here in the region, unfortunately.
So let's transition quickly into the reason that would prompt us to do this again with another school or schools, and that is our staff and the lack thereof that we have. And can you talk about our staffing?
Yeah, sure. And I've talked about this publicly too, Brian. I am really genuinely concerned about our staffing levels and our staff morale. We like virtually every business in America, certainly every business here in Bedford County, there are more jobs than there are people who are available for those jobs. So we started this school year off, unlike any other school year, where we were behind the 8 ball already. I mean, if you passed a school marquee in the last month or two, you've seen, bus drivers wanted. Not just bus drivers, we're short custodians, nurses, counselors, teachers. Name a job category, we're short. Yeah, just to clarify, just like how short, we need about 180 people to drive the buses to get kids to school every day. And we were very aggressive in our marketing and some other creative ways to try and address that concern. And we were only short by about 8 or 10 drivers at the start of the school year. So 8 or 10 school bus routes that we didn't have a person to cover. But now, because of the Delta variant, because of people contracting COVID from one another, or being a close contact with other people and having to quarantine until we know whether or not they're positive for COVID-19, we are short on staff every day. So it exacerbates the situation. So now, we're lucky if we have 155 to 160 people to drive the buses where we need 180, which means there's a lot of double backs or doubling up, which is very frustrating to parents and students because, the bus is just, it takes longer. We're doubling back or doubling up. And in the classroom, on any given day, we've got about 750 to 800 teachers who have an instructional schedule. If they need to be out for any reason, because of COVID-19 illness or quarantine or any other reason, we're going to need a fair number of substitutes to cover all those places. But we only have 60 substitutes to cover the entire school division. It's the lowest number we've had. People they don't want to work. They don't want to be in this environment, perhaps. I don't know. But we're lucky to fill 1 out of 3 jobs on a daily basis with a qualified substitute, which means 2 out of 3 jobs, there's no substitute. So we're asking our teachers to give up their planning time. And we're asking our principals to piece together a day to cover all of the classrooms so that the kids can be in school 5 days a week, full time, at the expense of teachers not having their planning time, which is time they desperately need in order to respond to parent emails, to plan their instruction, to grade their assignments, to collaborate with their peers. And that's gone when they're covering someone else's class. We are paying them. We have federal funding and we're paying our teachers for the loss of their planning time, but that planning still has to happen. So that just means all those emails and all that planning and all that's going to happen at the end of the day. And it's exhausting our teachers. And it's having a real effect, which I would fully anticipate an effect on the morale of our staff.
And so that's a good chance for me, when you mention morale, to hit on our last couple of topics, which I will combine, and that is your intentions, your prerogatives going forward. And I know that you've mentioned about forming a group of students within the county to meet with and talk with. And also, I know that you've mentioned getting out in the schools and sitting down and talking with our staff in the schools. Can you elaborate?
Sure. Well, I started June 1st officially, but before starting June 1st, in the months of April and May, I did some transitional visits to Bedford County. And during those 2 months, I toured every building, met with every principal, and met hundreds of staff in their work locations. And since the start of this school year, I have visited every building at least once, many of them multiple times. I've read aloud to elementary school children in just about all of our elementary schools. So I've been out and about engaging with our principals and our teachers. And I have done dozens of community events at this point. So I've met with, hundreds of citizens in Bedford County at places like the public libraries and other organizations that have invited me to come and be a part of their agenda. But I want to have an opportunity to meet with every person who works for us. And so I would have done that in the first month or 6 weeks of this school year, except, as we've beaten the horse here, COVID is not done with us. And there's been so much information with which I've had to react and work on the fly with our executive team in helping to guide our schools to getting open and having a health and safety mitigation plan. It's been very distracting from our core mission of teaching and learning. So at any rate, over the next 4 to 6 weeks, I'm going to be conducting a staff meeting with each school. We're going to hold those meetings via Zoom. Again, because of COVID-19 and our health and safety mitigation plan, we're not going to knowingly put groups of people together unless it's absolutely necessary. So Zoom is not nearly as good as being in person. I'd rather be in person with the staff, but I'm going to have a Zoom session with every school and invite anyone that works at that school to join me online so that we can talk together about this topic and other topics. And I am forming a superintendent student advisory group that'll consist of 8 students from each of our 3 high school zones. And I'm going to ask our principals to help me make sure that we have a good cross-sectional of all of our student bodies between those 24 kids. And I'm going to put them together. And we're going to talk about this and other topics that are of interest to them as kids about the work of Bedford County Public Schools and what we can do to improve upon our offerings for kids every day.
Dr. Bergin, I want to thank you for joining me and for answering these questions that are on a lot of people's minds. To begin the year, you kind of played on words and turned BCPS into being committed to a positive start. And I know you mentioned yesterday, this one that we're enduring now could be being committed to public safety. And so we'll keep on doing that until we see a light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's probably a good ending note, Ryan. While, COVID is not done with us, if we work together and we follow the health and safety mitigation plan that is online, and all of our students and all of our staff and all of our visitors work together with us so that we can keep our school environments safe for our students, then we can keep to that core mission of teaching and learning and having kids in school every day. So I thank our community members for their support of our schools. I might end with, if you happen to, anyone watching this video happens to run across one of our bus drivers or one of our office associates or a nurse or a counselor or an administrator or a teacher, anybody, an instructional assistant, a custodian, somebody who helps us stay open every day for in-person instruction, please thank that person for the work that they're doing so that we can stay open and we can have kids in school every day.
Dr. Bergin, thank you again for joining me. It's been good to speak with you. And thank you as well for all those who have tuned in to listen. We all hope that you have a great rest of your day.